Islam is against terrorism. That's tagged into this presentation. And then I have a little thing on Sharia or Islamic law as well. And then the second presentation, we'll do questions, I think, before starting the second presentation, will be on interfaith relations, and some of that I will move through rather quickly so we can finish. I know it's 11:30 right now and you have to board your bus probably at 12:20 to be over at Benny's at 12:30. Okay. So, by the way, the picture there in the upper right is a picture of the Kaaba. That's where the building in Mecca that the Muslims face to pray. You'll see an example of Arabic calligraphy on the upper left. The Kaaba's on the upper right. On the upper left, Arabic calligraphy, because there's tradition against iconography in the Islamic tradition, calligraphy is turned into an art form. Some of you were taking pictures of a sign in the lobby. That is another form of Islamic calligraphy. The lower building on the right is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and the lower picture on the left is the Prophet's Mosque in Medina. We're going to go over some basic terms, beliefs, and practices. So, what is the worldwide population of Muslims? Approximately 1.6 billion people. There's some misconception that all Arabs are Muslims and all Muslims are Arabs. That's not the case. As a matter of fact, only 15% of the world's Muslims are Arab, and only, 90% of the Arabs are Muslim, but 10% are Christian as well. And there are 58 Muslim majority countries spanning from the western tip of Africa all the way over to Indonesia in the Pacific Ocean. And Indonesia, by the way, is the largest Muslim country in the world and is a non-Muslim country. In the United States, the population is diverse, and that is reflected as well here in the Milwaukee community. However, the Islamic tradition does not include the Nation of Islam or the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam. The Nation of Islam was a 20th century phenomenon in this country, and they have other religious beliefs and ideas that are outside the Islamic belief. The Ahmadiyya movement in Islam similarly maybe as it's a 19th century movement, just like Mormonism. The Church of Latter-day Saints is had a 19th century origin as well. So, and again, we estimate a population of about 15,000 in Milwaukee with 8 places of worship. I'm going to look at these 3 basic terms. First of all, the meaning of Islam itself. Islam, the Arabic language takes its meaning from the consonantal roots. The consonantal roots of Islam, the consonants are the S, L, and M sounds. In Arabic, that literally means submission. In the context of the religion, it means submission to the will of God. It also happens to be the root for the word of peace in Arabic, is salam. And then you've heard the term Muslim. Muslim would be one who submits to God. About Allah. Well, Allah just happens to be the Arabic word, contraction being between the and God, and therefore makes it superlative. The term Allah is used by Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews as well, and in the word Allah is also written, for example, in this Arabic Bible in the chapter of Genesis as well. There are 6 beliefs we're going to talk about, but before we get all wrapped up in these 6 beliefs, there are other beliefs that Muslims have as well. There may be, I've seen some scholar put together, there's 110 things you have to believe in if you're a Muslim. So for example, some other beliefs that are not in these 6 is that every human being is created in a way that he he or she would be capable of submitting to the will of God. Human beings have a free moral choice. There should be no compulsion in religion. People are born without inherited sin. The Quran tells the story of Adam and Eve, but also says that Adam and Eve prayed for forgiveness and were forgiven, and that all people are spiritually equal with piety, or that is righteousness, God consciousness being the only criteria. So belief in one God, there is nothing worthy of worship except the one God. God has many attributes and names which describe him. I think most of you will recognize these in your tradition, but one of them is that he does not father nor he is born. So in the Islamic tradition, we do not have the concept of Trinity. Jesus, peace be upon him, is recognized as a messenger of God. Mary is honored. We believe in many miracles, and one of them being the virgin birth. But in the world of creator, God, and creation, only God is on the creator side, and all of the prophets and everything in creation is on the creation side, and nothing comparable to him. So here's some of the characteristics of God, I think, which you would recognize in your own tradition. Even at the end, the avenger or the humiliator, so one who is arrogant or one who has committed injustice. There is a concept of a day of judgment. We'll get to that as well. Muslims believe in the concept of angels as well. Sometimes the concept, I think, of angels in Islam is a little different than that in Christianity. In Islam, there is a concept of Iblis or Satan, but he's weak. And he's actually another order of creation other than an angel, not a fallen angel. But be that as it may, they have a specific task. And one of them, the angel Gabriel, is tasked with revelation, just as in the Jewish Christian tradition. Muslims also believe that certain prophets were given specific revelations, but one might ask, do Muslims accept the Bible or the Hebrew Bible or other books of other religions as written? And no, there's a belief. The Islamic belief is that the Quran is the only one that has been, the others were not maintained in their original language, and there were some changes, and therefore the necessity of the Prophet Muhammad and the revelation of the Quran. And that revelation still exists in its original language. And as a matter of fact, people would say, if you say the Quran, you're only talking about what's written in Arabic. A translation, no matter how good the translator, is merely an interpretation of the original. What is the word Quran? It literally means the reading or the recitation. It is the principal source of every Muslim's faith and practice. Deals with a multitude of subjects, most of which are related to the worship of God and convincing human beings that God exists and that he should be worshipped. But it also has elements of law and other things in it as well. Basic themes are relationship between God and his creatures and also between people. Quran provides guidelines for also law issues as well. This is a sample from the Quran. Now, this is a translation in English of the it's of the opening chapter in the Quran. You can think of it as being the equivalent of the Lord's Prayer in its significance. This prayer, if a Muslim is praying the 5 daily prayers that are required at a minimum, he is saying this prayer 17 times during the course of those 5 prayers. Now, you can translate the prayer in English, but what is also lost in translation is the rhythm and the rhyme of the original Arabic language itself. So I'll recite this in Arabic, for you right now. I'll recite it flat. I won't do it in a recitation kind of, because there's a I'll say singing for lack of a better word. There are people who are trained in that as well. But if I recite it in flat Arabic, you'll at least hear some of the rhythm and some of the rhyme. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'll hold up my fingers for which verse I'm reciting. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka nabudu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. So that's, you can't translate the rhythm or the rhyme of the original. Here's another verse pointing out, and this is another belief, Islam does not recognize racial or sexual superiority on a spiritual level, because we are all created. Actually, this has two meanings. Not only are we tell the story of Adam and Eve, so not only do we have a common ancestry and we're all children of Adam and Eve, but we all were also created from a male and a female, so we can't claim some exalted biological status as well, or even that a woman is better than a man or a man is better than a woman, because we are created one from the other. Again, the noblest of us in the sight of God is the one who is most deeply conscious of him. Well, the fourth cardinal belief is belief in that messengers were sent by God to humanity with the basic message being worship God alone and submit to his will. None of them are divine. Jesus is human like all other prophets. Virgin birth and other miracles of his are accepted. Again, no concept of Trinity, no original sin. And the Quran says, although it was made to appear as if he was crucified, he was not. So, and here's another verse saying that, we should say we believe in God, what has been given from him to us, and what was given to these other prophets and given to Moses and Jesus. And we make no distinction between any of them, and that's a distinction that one is better than the other, or that they taught something different. Historically, some people, who is Muhammad, he lived from 570 to 632 AD. Muslims believe he's the last messenger of God. His traditions, his sayings, and what he did are considered the second source of Islamic knowledge and legislation after the Quran. So Muslims distinguish between the Quran and prophetic sayings. For Muslims, he is the most beloved person and the best example to follow, which is why you hear Muslims getting so upset. The blood center will have to wait. The most beloved person and best example to follow, why we get upset sometimes when he's vilified. Some samples of his sayings, which again are distinct from what would be in the Quran. You might find something analogous to this in the Quran, but these are separate sayings, of course, translated.
So there were others written down at the time outside what weren't in the Quran?
Right. So the Quran is not regarded by Muslims as being a collection of the Prophet's sayings. No, it's regarded as being revelation revealed to Muhammad from God through the angel Gabriel. So it's as if God had the angel Gabriel teach the Prophet these words, and those are kept distinct from his sayings. His sayings are collected and recorded by others. So Muslims, that's the distinction. Obviously my lecture to you is about what Muslims believe. It's not, I understand that the Jewish or Christian view would be that, of course, the Quran was written by Muhammad, and those are his words and his invention. So we believe in a day of judgment, resurrection after death, personal accountability, heaven and hell, eternal life. Which, by the way, I understand, I'm not sure of your order, but I think that you're spending some time at a Sikh temple and some time at a Hindu temple. Islam considers itself squarely an Abrahamic faith, in the Abrahamic tradition, and the natural progression and end of the Jewish, Christian, Islamic history of revelation. Hinduism and Sikhism, I'm not going to have some different beliefs. Sikhism combines some aspects of Hindu beliefs and some aspects of Islamic beliefs, and maybe there are other things as well. I don't characterize, I don't speak for another, but there is a difference. So when you're going to these places, you shouldn't think it's like all the same historic tradition, because every religion has its own story to tell and its own set of beliefs, and I hope that you can pick up that there are some differences. Finally, the sixth principle, cardinal belief, is that God has created things in a certain way. Like even the entire creation itself has its own terms and limits and will be come to an end. So whether it's creation itself, whether it's a particular human life, whether it's the way Muslims believe, there's a verse in the Quran that teaches that men or women, we are created with a, speaking in an analogous way, a high path and a low path. Those who pursue the high path, will achieve success. And of course, success in the eyes of God, is not, we're not talking about money necessarily. We're not talking about money. We're talking about spiritual success. While the others who pursue the low path, they, it's the idea of heaven and hell and personal accountability. 5 faith practices that we will talk about briefly. So the declaration of faith, one should at least publicly say once in their life that they believe that there is no deity worthy of worship except God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. By the way, that seated figure there says that in the Arabic language. It's another example of calligraphic art design. It says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There are 5 prayers. We talked about the timings for today in the congregational prayer on Friday. Prayer for Muslims is this combination of physical action, of standing, bowing, prostration, sitting. The only requirements are really to have a clean place to pray and to face towards the Kaaba in Mecca. And the prayer concerns itself with remembrance of God. And ideally, if one prays 5 times a day, one remembers who they are and the purpose of life, and also it would be an encouragement to refrain from wrongdoing as well. This is a picture towards which Muslims face when they pray. Now, obviously, you are inside Mecca itself, facing the Kaaba. You're literally in concentric circles, but when you expand it out to all across the globe, when you're in Milwaukee, you're facing, and most of North America, you're facing northeast. Wrong button. We believe that the prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael built the original structure, although it has been destroyed and rebuilt, earthquakes and floods many times through the millennia. There's a stone in it called the Black Stone. The only significance of that stone is it's known to be original to the structure, or at least by tradition, it's original to the structure.
What is or was it?
The Black Stone, people think it was just a meteorite.
What was it?
It was a house of worship built by Abraham and Ishmael, dedicated to the worship of God. This is a picture of the Kaaba at night during our month of fasting, the month of Ramadan. It's a huge time of pilgrimage, but it's not the largest pilgrimage but it's the second largest time.
So are all the little white things people?
Those are people. And it's also 3 levels. So this is like the ground level here. And this ground level extends all the way underneath this structure. The entire area can hold about 3 million people. And they're expanding it now. Then there's a second level through here, and a third level, and then there's the roof actually. So you're seeing the people on the roof. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Now I might have done it.
Oh, there's something, it says something on your screen. Your computer screen.
It says, no, you don't.
And now I've done it.
Yeah.
Why would we have such a cruddy outlet here?
Yeah, every time you stick it in, it puts a new thing on your screen.
It's getting power.
Yeah, it's good.
It's got power.
Yeah, just have to do something over here.
The red light is turned white.
Might take a minute for this to power up.
We're gonna have to delete those things.
Allah shines upon you.
There. Another. No, it's related to the holiday that's coming up. We'll get to it in just a minute. So we have to give a certain portion of our wealth every year. It literally means purification, like purification of wealth. Some categories are more highly. Fasting during Ramadan. The month of Ramadan is the 9th lunar month of the Islamic religious calendar. Our religious calendar is a lunar calendar. The lunar year is 11 days shorter than the solar year. Unlike the Jews, we do not add an extra month, 11 of every 19 years, I believe it is, which is, by the way, why both Passover and Easter and Good Friday bounce back and forth on the calendar, because it's on the Jewish religious calendar is kind of like at the cause of that. The purpose of the basic rules are right at the top. The purpose is to show gratitude and increase spiritual training. This year, the month of Ramadan was from approximately May 26th to June 25th. It advances 11 days every year because the lunar year is shorter. So during the course of a lifetime, it takes about 30 years to advance through the entire year. So you might get to experience fasting during different seasons, during 2 complete cycles during your life if you live to be 70 or 75. Fasting and actually any religious requirements are not obligatory, not required until one reaches puberty. So I mean, whether it's prayer, fasting, zakat. So the pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, it occurs during the first 10 days, but the height is from the 8th to the 13th actually of the 12th lunar month. It commemorates certain events in the lives of Prophet Abraham, Prophet Ishmael, and Hagar. Now, Muslims believe that Prophet Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba, but before that, they also believe that, the story, by the way, is told in Genesis, so that Prophet Abraham took Ishmael and Hagar and left them in a wilderness. Well, they left them in the area of Mecca. And so some of the events commemorate Hagar looking for water for her then infant son or toddler, and the infant being left and kicking his heel in the ground and a well springing up from where he was kicking. Nonetheless, so There's a lot of the Hajj ceremonies have to do with Abraham and Ishmael and Hagar and not Prophet Muhammad. It does emphasize universal brotherhood and equality of mankind, and Malcolm X, who became Malik al-Shabazz, he writes very emotionally about it in his autobiography of Malcolm X with Alex Haley. About 3 million pilgrims gather at the height of Hajj. This is just a crowd shot. There is an ambulance. This is a hill on which the prophet delivered his final, what's all called his farewell sermon, but it was the only Hajj that he left, and he delivered it from on top of this small hill. This is not a giant hill. You can see the people there who have climbed up on that hill. And there are Islamic virtues as well, just like every faith tradition has its virtues. The source virtues are the oneness of God and God consciousness, but some Islamic virtues are listed there, and you should recognize them from, I think, your own traditions as well. I'll say the bottom one, modesty, is modesty also in dress and in the way we interact with each other. I know Janan Najib is going to talk to you at the lunch, and she'll probably discuss some of those issues. This is now the article that I had written to the youth, because it's kind of a scary time, for Muslims in this country. I mean, the truth is we are just as concerned that our children be raised in the proper manner, and as in any other family has these concerns that their child be raised in the proper way. So terrorism most frequently, or often at least, takes the form of murder. Murder is strictly forbidden in the Quran. In fact, in one area, the murder of a single human being is compared as if one has murdered all of mankind. Islam forbids compulsion in religion. The verse in chapter 2, verse 256, I'm sorry, the red is not coming up very well. There shall be no coercion in matters of faith. Distinct has now become the right of way from the right of error. Islam forbids aggressive warfare. So, for example, in one verse, but if those who have broken their treaty with you and have aggressed against you incline to peace, incline you to it as well, and place your trust in God. The thing about the Quran is sometimes people quote certain verses out of the Quran. And so like in this chapter 861 or chapter 290, which is, yes, there is a verse in front of it that says, fight those who have fought against you, but then it also clearly conveys the message, always in the same passage, that God does not love aggression, and that if they seek towards peace, you have to seek towards it also. In another passage in the Quran imposes a 4-month notice. There is no surprise initiation of war. No surprise fire and fury. Although it is permissible, if you feel you're going to be attacked, it is permissible to go out. So there are two examples. For example, the prophet there was a rumor that he was going to be attacked by a Persian army, and it was decided that he would take an army and go and march out and meet it. And so he did take an army and marched out 10 days and met it, but when it turned out that the rumor was false, he turned the army around and went back to Mecca instead of rather just continuing on and attacking. Abu Bakr, the first caliph, included these instructions to his armies: instruct you in 10 matters. Do not kill women, children, the old or infirm. Do not destroy any town, etc. Here's another thing. This use of the jihad in Islam is actually a noble concept, because it primarily means struggling against the inclination to do evil within oneself. So it's a struggle against evil. It does not mean holy war. Holy war is something else. But when you call somebody a jihadi, if you call a terrorist a jihadi, they love it. They eat it up. You're using a religious label on them. They want to characterize us, first of all, as a religious issue, not a political issue or the like. And they want to, so jihad would be like the American equivalent, I think probably would be like patriot. So, okay, it was a patriot. It was an American patriot who took their car and rammed the crowd in Charlottesville last weekend. It was a patriotic act. Well, what people were calling people jihadis or mujahid in the Islamic tradition is, again, somebody who is, is somebody who is using a noble Islamic term and calling somebody who's doing something un-Islamic, Islamic in act. It would be like saying the person who rammed that car into Charlottesville is acting patriotically when doing it. I mean, it's just crazy, but giving this term, the better term would be hiraba, which is under Islamic law, means anybody who is using fear or coercion to gain money or power. I mean, these people are criminals. These people are not in any way acting according to Islamic teachings or law. Islam forbids returning evil with evil. So this saying of the Prophet, do not be people without minds of your own, saying that if others treat you well, you will treat them well, and that if they do you wrong, you will do wrong to them. Instead, accustom yourselves to do good if people do good, and not to do wrong even if they do evil. Islam warns against acting out of hatred. So this verse of the Quran, and do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just. That is nearer to righteousness. Finally, Islam requires protection of people of the book. Who are the people of book? People of the book are any people who have received revelation about belief in God. It's most widely regarded as referring to Christians and Jews. And another saying here at the bottom of this, the Prophet said, a Muslim who wrongs a Jew or a Christian will have myself as his accuser on the day of judgment. So you get the Prophet of Islam against the Muslim for anyone who does that. Sharia. Well, Sharia literally means path and is not synonymous with law. And it really consists of three separate elements, including public interest law as well. The principal goals of Sharia are preservation of religion, life, intellect, reason, family, and property. It has been pointed out that you take these 5 things, and then there's a person called John Locke. And John Locke wrote the second treatise on government, which could not be published during his lifetime because he feared persecution because of it. His professor was Edward Pocock, Oxford Arabic chair, who was called a Muslim or a Turk by this minister. He also had a friend, Henry Stubb, who wrote a book also not published during his lifetime. An account of Mohammedanism is the old name that some people used for Islam. It falsely implies that Muslims worship Muhammad. No, they worship God. They don't worship the Prophet. So he took these, boiled it down into these 4. Then Thomas Jefferson, who studied John Locke but didn't have his book with him when he went to Philadelphia in 1776, kind of boiled life and liberty into life. Liberty is liberty, and you have to have your health, and maybe possessions make you happy, or maybe family makes you happy, whatever makes you happy, you should have the ability to pursue happiness. So it has been pointed out that the principles of the Declaration of Independence are consistent with Sharia. And there's an article that our religious director, who happens to be the executive director of the highest juridical body for Muslims in North America, and he's written an article about that as well. So that's the end of that presentation. Are there questions while I load the second and
I have
the
a
exit?
question about Islamic faith in America, where we have people there's more than one variety of Islam. What about the Milwaukee population?
Sure. So